Hi, folks. Welcome to this new Windows in the Cloud episode where we're going to talk with Eric out of Brazil, a Microsoft Windows 365 MVP, about Windows 365 and his learnings and best practices that he learned at customers. So before we start, make sure to subscribe on the Windows IT Pro YouTube channel to stay up to date about all the latest news about Windows 365 in the link down below. And if you have any questions during this episode, make sure to post them underneath this episode here in the tech community page, or just on our social media page as well. So with that, I'm very excited to have community expert Eric here on our show out of Brazil, as I said before. So hi, Eric. How are you doing?
Hi, Christian. Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor.
Yeah, it's great to have you finally here on the show. And normally you run those like shows as well yourself, right? Events and such. So can you share with the audience a little bit what you do, what your role is, and how you became an MVP?
Oh, sure. No, I've been, working with remoting technologies for my whole professional life. So I think it's past like 25 years now. So, it's for me, this kind of work from home has always been my life, right? So I started doing kite surfing, and then that led me to Brazil. And of course, I found my wife to become, right? And now we have 3 kids and all that kind of stuff. But, working with remoting technologies made it possible to me to actually go to Brazil in the beginning and having great vacation time and all that kind of stuff. And then my boss just let me go and say, okay, just go to Brazil and work against our customer in Norway. And I did that for a couple of years before, they decided then, or somebody, CIO or something, figure out who is this crazy guy in Brazil we are paying, right? So I was let go. By that time, I think I've been a Citrix CDP now for 10 years. I was Microsoft MVP for the data center, doing a lot of automation there. And then, Windows 365 came up, and, Christian invited me to take part of that. And I'm really glad by doing that, because I think that Windows 365, especially the enterprise edition, is something. It's very special and something that's going to grow and grow and grow going forward. So I'm really looking forward to what's coming now in the future.
Here, thanks. And it's really great to see that the technology that we have been using allows us to work from Brazil, and for me from like the Redmond area. And it doesn't really matter where you work, the technology makes it possible. So jumping a little bit into, hey, how did you came in touch with Windows 365, and what got you excited about it? Like what was kind of the trigger? You already said like the enterprise product is kind of cool, but can you point out some examples that really created that stickiness for you as an IT pro?
Oh, so for me it was most definitely the integration with Intune, and just one-click button to get started, right? And that's a lot that my customer loves as well, because they have AVG and all that kind of stuff, but we basically, the company cannot deliver an AVD solution fast enough, and everything is moving so fast these days, and just being able to click a button in 30 minutes or less, you have a Windows 365 instance running, right? So all the automation stuff that you can bring in there. Let's say you have AD groups or Azure AD groups, as I prefer to use for licensing. Then basically when HR add a new accountant or user or whatever, they will instantly get the VM. And by that time they get the email, the VM is already ready and they can start working.
Yeah, it's great to hear that. And knowing your virtualization background, of course, too, this is great to hear, and really simplifies everything we kind of did in the last 20 years with implementing VDI to make that more available kind of for everyone, right? Like virtualization kind of has been hard to implement for some like normal IT pro. And with Windows 365, pretty much everybody that has modern workplace like knowledge can implement it. Do you share that kind of experience? Or
Yeah, and we've been doing non-persistent for forever, right? So people love that, and there's a lot of people that don't want to go away from non-persistent. They want non-persistent, but I don't agree. I think that the future going forward now is persistent VMs, because today is not the same that it was 5 years ago. We didn't have all those security vulnerabilities and all the hacking, all that kind of stuff. So what we're seeing in the industry is that people using non-persistent images, they cannot keep up fast enough. And we did see that on a customer, because we did enable the endpoint for protection of devices. So we get all the all the stats from Microsoft. It's really amazing. You can go in there and you can see all the security vulnerabilities. You can see where the software is installed. You can see the different exposed devices. You can see the version history and all that kind of stuff. So what showed up there for one of our particular customer was that AVD hosts, so multi-session hosts, servers, and basically they cannot keep up. They cannot patch fast enough to close the 0-day exposure that they have. But by using the Intune technology that we use for both physical devices and virtual devices, being Cloud PC, we can basically just roll out the patch and it's going to apply. It doesn't matter where you come from. You get that patching and that application up to date. So it's really nice. That's what I love the most about Windows 365, and the reason why I say the enterprise SKU, because that integrates natively with Windows 365.
It's great to hear that, and we hear that more, and hearing it from you, that's great. Great to hear, and I will share that feedback across with the team, of course, as well. It's a nice beer glass you have there. I'm sure it's water, right? It's not something else.
At the moment, it's still water, but after I get off with your call, I'm gonna fill it up with something else.
That's how we roll as IT pros, right? Hey, moving a little bit into a more like serious topics and some tips and tricks and things you as an IT pro have been doing with like Windows 365 or projects with customers. Can you share a little bit like what you're up to? What have been your latest projects so far? And maybe jump into some tips and tricks as well for the audience.
Yeah, I believe have a tip or two that I can share. So my day-to-day work is moving over 1,000 applications from SSEM to Intune. So I have a big customer. So we are going to transition everything over there, and doing that manually is simply not possible. If we did manually, we would never reach our time goals in terms of the deployment. So as part of that, I've been developing my own automation stuff, which you can find on my blog. I also had a different Windows 365 user group, which I think we will link to below. So you can just watch that and you can follow what we're doing. But basically, you're taking the information that you will manually add inside of Intune. So instead of doing stuff manually, you put it into XML file, you have the silent install switches, you have the description, the icon, and then you run the script and it automatically pushes that application out to Intune. So based on that, be sure to have proper naming standard, that being Active Directory groups, Azure groups, the naming convention of your application. I prefer to do product vendor version, because you want to automate as much as possible. And if you do that, it will be easier for you going forward. Let's say you want to kill off the on-prem Active Directory solution. Now, if you are using naming standard correctly, then you can easily create a PowerShell script to just copy whatever user in an on-prem group to an Azure Active Directory group. So naming standard is very important.
You as well called out some examples with application migration, but what about image management? Like how do you do that in a daily basis at customers? Can you share some tips there?
Image management. There's no need for image management. I have Windows 365. Everything is patched for me. So what we're doing is that we're using AutoPatch, right? So AutoPatch is really amazing, and it's just a one-click button, and then you have it. And to give you some update, today was released the integration of Office 365 as well. So now you have both the software of Office 365, and then you have the Windows updates. And based on some survey I've been taking in terms of AutoPatch, there might be coming some other stuff as well. So go use that technology. It's really amazing. A tip about the AutoPatch technology is to make sure that you put your C-level people to the last ring and put your IT people on the first ring or the test ring. That way you will make sure that everything is working properly before you push it out to your CEO and so on. And another tip there is, based on that ring technology that Microsoft handles automatically for you, you can use those same rings for third-party software upgrades. So I'm using that in my lab, and I'm going to put it out to my customers as well. I prefer to do everything in my lab, make sure everything is working properly doesn't break anything, and then we put it out to the customers as well.
Yeah, that's great. And just you're plugged in pretty nicely in the roadmap of AutoPatch. The AutoPatch team has been or is still sitting in the same building as the Windows 365 engineering team. So our leader, our CVP, owned both products before we reorged AVD and Windows 365 in one engineering team. So the same vision, the same mindset about making things easy and automate things is exactly the same between AutoPatch and Windows 365. So it's great that you share that same experience too. What about like optimizations on the end user experience side, like running videos in a Cloud PC and such? How do you recommend to configure that, or how is that working for you at customers?
Oh, cool. Glad you mentioned that. So I think it was a couple of weeks ago. Then there was the general availability of the multimedia redirection services, and I instantly installed that. Right. So it was, working with this kind of technology for a lot of years. I know how the technology works. I've been using it with other vendors. So when Microsoft released it for both AVG and Windows 365, I just jumped on it. And as I said, I have my automation stuff for creating the app. So it took me like, just download the executable, find the switch, and it took me like 5 minutes to implement it, right? So what you want to do there is that this is something that you want to roll out to all your Windows 365 instances and AVD, right? So what I recommend doing there is creating a filter, which is preferred. If you don't want to filter, you can do dynamic groups as well. But what you want to do is that you want to create a filter that finds, every machine that's created by Microsoft. It's the model is virtual machine, and you want to, if you have naming standard, if it starts with AWD, or for Cloud PC we have CPC. So you want to target that. By using that one, then you add it to your application as a required install, and off you go. It just works. The only thing to be aware of is that you also need to whitelist the extension for Edge in our case. You can also enable that for Google Chrome as well if you prefer that. But in many cases, you have security baseline for Edge or something where you only have allowed extension, right? So you want to make sure that the proper extension is enabled. So basically what happens the next time when the user start Edge, you will see the redirection icon grayed out. Now, if you go to YouTube, it would instantly light up as, with colors. And if you then start a movie or a trailer or whatever, you will see that you get a kind of a green check mark that shows that it's going on something. And you can get the stats as well there, if I remember correctly. So yeah, it's really nice. It's working really nice. And I haven't tested it yet with team calls and all that kind of stuff, but in terms of doing the high resolution stuff with YouTube, works really, really well.
Well, that's great, Eric. And MMR is default enabled in Cloud PCs. And I also remember the time configuring that in VDI environments, which was really hard to do on a large scale. So thanks for your tips and tricks there. What about like security and compliance? Anything to share there? Like how do you keep your Cloud PCs up to date and compliant for your customers?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that one. My customer is in the government space, so they have really strict compliance policies. So what happened when, I told them, let's do a Windows 365 GitHub shot, compare it to what you already have with AVD and see what you like the best. And they really love the Windows 365 because it's so fast. As I said, they can get a new machine in 30 minutes. I've been waiting for 2 weeks for my AVD machine and I still haven't got it. So, it's a pain. So what happened is what normally happens in all the environment when people get starting with Intune. So when they create deployment groups or application compliance policy, where you want to install it, they just click all devices, all users. And you're going to regret that. So I really recommend you creating dynamic groups, using filters and all that kind of stuff. Because when you say all devices, that means all devices, right? So what we saw when we enabled Windows 365 was that the next day we got a compliance email from, Windows 365 is not compliant because we enable BitLocker by default, right? So BitLocker works a little bit different in Windows 365, right? So it's encrypted, but it doesn't use the regular stuff. So what you need to do is create a filter where you say that, okay, if this machine is a CPC model, then you know it's a Cloud PC. Then we want to exclude the Cloud PCs from the compliance policy, and then you want to create a new policy where you actually include it. So basically you say exclude, and then you turn off the BitLocker stuff, and then you create a new one, identical one, just without the BitLocker stuff. And that way you will see that the computer is compliant inside. When you go to the company portal, you will see if it's compliant or not. So we did that. That worked really well. Another trick there is many agencies that require you to, they need to whitelist your public IP, right? So out of the box, you don't have a public IP with Windows 365, right? So you just get a dynamic one. But it's really easy to fix. Basically, you just add a NAT gateway to your VNet, and then you just assign them that way you get a public IP that they can whitelist inside of their system. So it's really cool. It's really cool. So there's stuff that's not available out of the box, but it's pretty easy to fix it. So make sure that, use the dynamic groups and filters so you don't get all devices. Try to segment the devices. You don't want to push out a HP update to all your Dell machines, right? You get the picture. Make sure to create the filters properly.
Yeah, I'm really happy with like the filter feature. Scott Duffy is the PM on that, and I'm in regular touch with him. He's owning the filters and such, and it's really an outcome for all those use cases where you just need to make an exception on your default compliancy policies and such. Before we wrap up, like last time we talked, you are using Sandbox and nested virtualization too. Is that something you leverage as part of Windows 365 as well?
Oh man, I can't live without that one. So Sandbox is a godsend for whoever works with, creating application, testing application, making sure everything is working properly. Because basically you click a button and then you have your Windows VM ready to go. So you copy in, okay, let's take the Multimedia redirection plugin that we talked about. So you copy that inside of your Sandbox, run the setup, and that way you can find out via registry where is, what I'm going to use as my detection methods are. So if you have an MSI, you use the MSI code. But if you have, crappy app that installs wherever location in your registry, you want to find that, and you don't want to install in your production environment. I don't want to install all of my software on my Cloud PC, right? So I just turn on the Sandbox and I do it, and then I close it down again. Okay, I found the silent arguments for the installation. Okay, let's test that. We test it in Sandbox. So I've been using the highest SKU for this, and I'm really excited that it now has been permitted also for the 4V CPU. So you can get started now for $66 with Sandbox, and it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, and we are looking at ways on supporting it as well for example, the lower SKUs in the future as well. So stay tuned for that. I think we can wrap up here, and I really like all the tips and tricks you shared. I think it's amazing to see how this product is being used by yourself and your customer in relationship to other products, but as well, just the tips and tricks that you just shared. Can people stay in touch with you via blogs and such you just mentioned? Like, can you share a little bit about like where people can follow you on social media and things like that?
Yeah, I think the best way would go to Twitter. So, I don't read newspapers anymore, but I read Twitter, right? So in a technology space, you can't live without Twitter. You don't have to post, but the most important thing is that you follow people that talks about the technology that we work with. How would you know that, today the Windows patch team added, support for Windows 365? I saw it because I was reading on Twitter. So whatever I do, just follow on Twitter, and there you find the links to my blog and all that kind of stuff.
Sounds good. We will provide the links in here so people can just hit and click and stay up to date with you with the amazing things you just shared as well after this episode. And I would like to thank you as well as a listener, as a watcher, a reoccurring or a new one. And please be sure to stay up to date about all the latest updates and as well episodes at ak.ms/Windows in the Cloud. And with that, I would like to thank you once more, and I hope to see you next time.